Happy February 1st. I am here with Emma Murphy from Ireland. I'm very excited to have her as a guest on the Wellness Whisperer. She's got a phenomenal background, so just let me tell you a little bit about Emma. Emma Murphy is a psychotherapist specializing in disordered eating and the executive director of an organization called Eating Freely. Her mission is to help 1 in 5 adults who struggle with binge eating disorder. She is also the author of The Four Energies of Emotional Eating, which is available on Amazon. Emma's worked in private practice as eating disorders specialist for over 11 years, and she has extensive experience of working with both individuals and groups um, who are on the eating disorder spectrum. She is recognized as an expert in disordered eating and regularly speaks internationally. She is an accredited trainer, and all of her trainings are approved in the continuing education programs. Since 2017, Emma and her team have been training both health professionals in person and online in her evidence-based program about emotional eating and binge eating disorder at Eating Freely. And there is a network of Eating Freely practitioners across the globe now, starting in Ireland, in the United States, in South Africa, and Singapore. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm
Let's
delighted to be
start.
here.
Yeah, let's start and talk about eating freely. When did you found that and how did that come to be?
Sure. So I was working in private practice as a disordered eating specialist. And I suppose I fell into that area. I didn't really have any idea why I was drawn to the area of eating disorders, but I had been drawn to it from the moment I started my psychology degree. I went back to college at the age of 30 to retrain. I'm 55 now, so that was 25 years ago. I can't believe it. But I was studying eating disorders from the moment I started, and I wasn't really too sure why I was being drawn to that area because I have never suffered with eating disorders myself. Although I find that a lot of practitioners who are drawn to our training are actually drawn to it because they do have their own lived experience. And I suppose it was as I grew as a practitioner in this space. Um, First of all, I suppose I could see the common personality traits among clients, the common experiences that they had had, and even the common factors amongst their families that made it logical for me to develop, I suppose, a structured evidence-based program that would help a lot of people. So even and I don't like to ever say that it's one size fits all because it is not. Everybody's story is completely different and everyone's experience is unique. But there certainly are a lot of commonalities and crossovers across all clients so that we were able to develop a framework within which we could help these clients. And the important thing for me is actually the personality type of the clients because when you understand how the clients operate in the world and what impacts them, they the program is built to really fit with the client and how they think, how they feel or don't feel, and how they actually operate in the world, how they interact with other people. And I suppose going back to why I was drawn to the area of eating disorders, as my personal and professional development continued, it was a supervisor who once said to me, Emma, you get the clients you need. And of course, I share the personality type, and I have a lot of commonalities in my own history, my own background, my own family, and my own experiences as the client. So I am exactly like our client with emotional eating or binge eating disorder. I just never turned to food as my coping strategy, but anything that I learned about myself then, I was also able to bring it into the work with the clients. And so the program evolved both from working with many hundreds of clients in my private practice, but also doing my own personal work. And when it worked for me, I would offer it to clients. And if it worked for clients as well, it went into the program.
Yeah, and explain to the audience how big of a problem eating disorders are. I understand there's 5 different levels. You're concentrating on the binge eating, but there's bulimia, anorexia, uh, restrictive eating. How big of a problem is it in the world?
Really, it's second only behind anxiety. Anxiety is the most common problem that affects people as a mental health issue, and disordered eating will come second after that. And it is a real misnomer to call it disordered eating, because then people just think it's about food, and of course it's not. It's very much about mental health. It's a safety behavior. It's very often connected to trauma. Um, and yes, they reckon about 1 in 5 adults will have at least had one experience or period in their lives when they struggled with their relationship with food.
Um, and then would it be considered, because I've worked in marketing and mental health and psychiatric places, a disease just like alcoholism or drug abuse, or not?
So I don't particularly like using the addiction model in relation to food, because you can't give up food. You can give up alcohol, you can give up,
Great point.
gambling, etc., but you cannot give up food. So to speak about food addiction, I don't find helpful. And actually, I don't find it helpful to even talk about sugar addiction. And that's something that we hear a lot of. Because again, then you're getting into this all or nothing sort of framework where people they have to cut out all sugar. And one of the key personality types that all of our clients have is that all or nothing thinking. So they're usually quite high achieving, perfectionistic, all or nothing. They're either doing it all right or all wrong. And that is actually one of the biggest saboteurs for when we're trying to actually support them to understand that you can have a lapse and it doesn't have to be a collapse. And that actually we can survive very well in the messy middle, and aim for like the sloppy B, as I say, 70%. If you're doing it right 70% of the time, you've got 30% wiggle room. And of course, we have to be able to emotionally eat, because everybody emotionally eats. We all eat for emotional reasons. We eat when we're happy, we eat when we're sad. It's culturally acceptable. Food is a key part of big life events. I mean, the Irish funeral, I mean, that's about food and drink, 3 days of it. Um, weddings, celebrations. So you can't live in that perfectionistic all or nothing and cut something out completely. And, the only reason anybody should be cutting anything out completely out of their diet is if they're allergic to it. Other than that, despite all of the rules and the latest internet trend and what they'll tell you about carbs and what they'll tell you about protein and what they'll tell you about, paleo and clean and blah, blah, and all the other, diets that are out there, it's very simple. We need to eat a combination of protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And if we're doing that right about 70 to 80% of the time, then the other 20% of the time, we can have a takeaway, we can have a pizza, we can have chocolate, and it's all good. But that's a very difficult place for clients to get to when they've been trapped in a cycle of having a huge list of forbidden foods and trying to restrict their calories and their intake, and eating like a lot of clients would eat a very limited range of foods as part of their normal eating, if you like, their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But then, of course, hunger is one of the triggers for binge eating. And when you're binge eating, you're not binging on kale or avocado. You're binging on all the foods that you've actually told yourself you can't have. So that all or nothing thinking is a really big problem for a lot of our clients.
Yeah. And we do live in a kind of restrictive culture, unfortunately. Have you seen, since you've been deeply steeped in this for 25 years, that social media has probably pushed anxiety up and unrealistic expectations on image up? Therefore, the disorders have went up.
Absolutely, Brenda. And I mean, I don't mind saying I have an 18-year-old daughter myself. She's only just turned 18. She has been in an all-girls school for the past 6 years. And whatever about before the pandemic, during the pandemic and afterwards, she was coming home to me and telling me how many girls were anorexic, how they were going to counselling. There was a queue in the bathrooms at lunchtime for people to get sick. It was absolutely just epidemic, and I was horrified. This is very difficult for me to hear this, and yet what was playing out in her school was playing out in every all-girls school across the country. Do you know? Um, but I also see on the other side my daughter, first of all, absolutely glued to her phone. The phone is stapled to her hand, like you literally can't prise it off her. And I see her examining every tiny little flaw in herself. Oh no, don't share that photograph. I've got a double chin, or don't show that photograph. One of my eyes looks like it's, looking off into the other direction. And this, minuscule examination of how they look and how other people are perceiving them is a huge, huge issue. And there's no doubt it's absolutely increasing the numbers of people we are seeing with disordered eating. And I will say that the calls and the emails to me from parents of younger girls through the pandemic and even afterwards went through the roof. I mean, we couldn't cope, and we don't work with under 18s for a start. I was referring them on to my colleagues. But I was actually getting emails from the colleagues who do work with younger clients saying, I can't take anybody for 6 months. I have an 18-month waiting list. I mean, it just was crazy. And there's no doubt in my mind that social media plays a huge part in people developing body dysmorphic disorder and thinking that there's something wrong with them because they don't look absolutely perfect. But I will say there's another thing about social media as well, which is equally concerning to me, and it's the amount of fake information that's out there. So we have a lot of people putting themselves forward as, health gurus or fitness gurus or wellness gurus, and, promoting restrictive eating, or cutting out certain foods or eating in a certain way. And they really don't know what they're talking about. They have not been trained. They are not medical professionals. They are not health professionals. And yet, because they're an influencer and they've got 5,000 or 50,000 or 500,000 followers, everything that comes out of their mouth is gospel. And people follow these routes that they go down, and they're bringing them down a bad path because they don't know what they're talking about. So there's no doubt that social media is a huge problem for our particular area at the moment, and I can't see an end to it anytime soon, unfortunately. But we do the best we can in terms of trying to educate people. I would often say to people, if you're spending a lot of time on a device or a phone and on social media, check in with yourself as to how you feel after half an hour or an hour of being online. Do you feel really good about yourself? Do you feel really positive? Do you come off and say, oh, that was great and I really enjoyed that. I chatted with my friends and I read some inspirational stuff. And, no, most people come off their phone and they feel anxious, a little bit insecure. There's a lot of thoughts going around in their head. And obviously, if clients are struggling with emotional binge eating, it could actually trigger them then to go and binge eat. So, we would kind of say to do an audit of what you're doing on social media and checking in on what impact it's having on how you feel about yourself and your mood. And if it's not helping you, then maybe, start unfollowing a few people and trying to follow other people who actually make you feel good about yourself, and being more intentional about the kind of content that you're actually reading and absorbing, because it's all going in somewhere, but is it going in for good or is it going in for bad?
And you spoke of your 18-year-old daughter. I was reading a statistic. I think that 30% of people suffering or trying to tackle the binge eating disorder were men. So it's not all women. What are the statistics, as far as it's all genders, all ages, all.
Yeah, so really interesting about eating disorders. I mean, if I say I'm an eating disorder specialist, what is normally the first thing that will come into your mind? And like normally it's anorexia, it's a young, thin girl.
Teenage girl.
And actually, yeah, and only 1 out of 10 eating disorder sufferers has anorexia. It's actually the smallest proportion of eating disorder sufferers. The reason it gets the most attention is because it actually has a mortality rate attached to it. People die when they have anorexia. They starve themselves to death. So of course it's taken very seriously, and it's a particularly distressing disease for anybody who has it. And it is a psychiatric, mental health illness. It's a very serious mental health illness. Um, with bulimia, that's a little less, I don't put that in the psychiatric category, in the same category as anorexia, but again, it's quite serious, and it also has a mortality rate attached to it, but people don't necessarily know that or understand that. So if 20% of anorexia sufferers will die as a direct result of the anorexia, and that is the statistic, 10% of bulimia sufferers will die as a result of their bulimia. And that is because with repeated purging, whatever way they are doing that, they are impacting their heart function and they're affecting their electrolyte balance. And that's what will cause, it's actually usually a heart attack will be the cause of death for somebody with bulimia. With binge eating disorder, 9 out of 10 eating disorder sufferers, so the rest are actually somewhere on the binge eating disorder scale. Now, bulimia can come in there on that scale also, but 9 out of 10 eating disorder sufferers are actually somewhere in the emotion eating, binge eating, or compulsive overeating spectrum. 40% of them are male, and that can go from 12 years of age to 70 years of age. I mean, the oldest client I ever had contacting me for the very first time to get help with her disordered eating, having struggled with it since she was a child, was 68 years of age, and she reached out to me during the pandemic. 68.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's embedded in our society. It's a constant problem. Um, since you're moving, eating freely across the continent, is there a shortage of providers that can deal with this? I know I live in
Absolutely.
Kansas City, and I think there's probably two special clinics focusing on it, and that's it.
Yeah. So an absolutely massive shortage of practitioners, and that is one of our big hairy goals, to actually be the world's leading network of emotional eating and binge eating disorder specialists and make sure that anyone anywhere can get the help that they need at a level that they can maybe afford to get it, and that's a difficult thing to do as a private organization, to be honest. And we're learning every day and making mistakes every day, but we're getting there. But I really do feel strongly about making sure that this help is available. And there's a variety of different reasons for that, Brenda. First of all, I mean, I am 55, and okay, I'm not, ready to shuffle off the mortal coil yet, but I would like to retire at some point. And, if I decided to retire without teaching other practitioners what I know, everything that I've learned over, now the last 14 years, would die with me. Like when I retire, that's it. It doesn't go anywhere. So I started training other practitioners about 7 years ago. I actually did it because I was so busy and I had such a long waiting list, again, because of the shortage, that I had nobody to refer my waiting list clients to. So I trained two of my colleagues in the centre I was working in, and they loved the program. Their clients loved the program. It worked really well. So then, I started training other practitioners here in Ireland and just other therapists. I'm a psychotherapist, so I just started training other therapists that I knew. And this is all pre COVID, so it was in person in a hotel room, that kind of thing. It wasn't online. Um, and we were just getting up to a stage where we were going to move into the UK in 2020, and we were also going to run a pilot in Australia in 2020 because I had been down to Australia, and there's again a very significant shortage of specialists in binge eating disorder down in Australia. And then the pandemic hit, and we all had to lock ourselves away for a couple of years. So we pivoted and we put the training online so that we could get it out. And the first version of our online training was really ugly, but it worked, and we refined it, we cleaned it up, and we improved it. And now we are training people, as you mentioned, we have practitioners in over 10 countries. And I actually have my little map of America out earlier on today, and I was putting pins in it as to where we have practitioners in the States. But we need a lot more people, and we need a lot more people to take our training. And even more so for me, and one of the soapboxes that I stand on is obesity healthcare. And obesity is such a huge issue for the healthcare services right now, but they don't incorporate specialist psychological support in the healthcare pathway. In fact, if you go in for if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and you're going in to get help from a diabetes educator or a type 2 diabetes program, they won't even ask you half the time if you're an emotion eater or a binge eater, or if they do ask you, it can actually exclude you from treatment because they'll see it as a problem. And the same with the bariatric service, they'll tell you that if you disclose that you have an eating disorder, you'll be referred away from the bariatric service and sent somewhere else. But there is nowhere to send you. There's nobody out there. Where we're saying train your team, let us come in and train your team so that you can bring this special support into the service and work with the clients wherever they're at on the spectrum and help them holistically and give them the help and support that they need so that they will have higher adherence to their protocols, they will see better health outcomes, and you'll see better health outcomes for your service also. But we've a long way to go to make that a mainstream reality. So I won't be retiring anytime soon, Brenda, unfortunately.
I need to clone you three times, but I do understand what you're recommending because working with primary care physicians in my past, they started embedding a social worker in the primary care physician's office to help send these folks to different services because not everyone just needs to deal with their cold. They have access issues, they have eating disorder issues, they have issues that they need support on beyond primary care. And yeah, it's a kind of a broken system that we're trying to figure out together. So we
Yeah.
appreciate the work that you're doing. Oh my gosh. Um, do you see that? I always read about the blue holes and the healthy people in these pockets of the world. Do you see that one country has more eating disorder issues than another. It's across the globe. It's just an issue with everybody in the UK, the United States.
Sadly, obviously in the first world, the developed world, Ireland, UK, and the USA, we would be probably the top three countries. Ireland is very high actually, which is shocking to me, but it is. Particularly when we're an agrarian society, we have a very strong farming background. We produce a lot of our own food. We're an island, so we have to produce a lot of our own food, and we produce a lot of really good food. But no country is immune to the pressure of the food producers and the easily accessible, hyper palatable, processed rubbish that's been put out there. And of course, we're all living that busy first world life where, we're time poor, we're reaching for food on the go. And we've really forgotten about our connection with food and the connection with our circadian clock and tapping back into that natural cycle. That's where the blue zones actually really beat us hands down in terms of having that healthy diet and lifestyle, because the blue zones are not only about what they eat, it's also about the work-life balance that they have and the time that they give to eat and the value that they place on cooking food from scratch and producing meals and eating together. And so there's a whole host of cultural factors that go into blue zone areas and the way that they live and the relationship with food and the relationship with the earth and the relationship with their bodies. So it's quite it's a hard model to follow fully in our busy westernized society. But yes, it's very sad to see that other cultures that would have had a huge culture of, again, eating together, cooking slowly, cooking great food, cooking from scratch. And I'm thinking about India in particular. So India's really becoming one of a global country. It's developing, very quickly. But I read a shocking statistic there recently that currently India has the highest percentage of adults who are both overweight and malnourished at the same time. And that's a shocking statistic for me to hear about a country like India. So yeah, it's unfortunately spreading its tentacles throughout the whole entire world, and I think it'll be a while before we reverse it, But look, people are becoming more aware of it, and it will take time for the tide to turn. But there are more practitioners across every health discipline every day becoming more aware of the problems, and trying to find the solutions. So, there's a lot of us in little pockets of the world doing our bit and
Right,
hoping to spread
right.
the word.
Yeah, I completely relate to the Western world. I know I stress eat, and the harder I work, the more I crave pizza and fat. And it's just part of it. Let's talk about your book, The Four Energies of Emotional Eating. That just came out just recently, correct? That's a
Well,
new
it was
release.
last year. Yeah, it's a book, but it's actually a card deck with a book that goes with it.
Mhm.
So the Four Energies of Emotional Eating, my card deck. And really what that is about. So again, speaking about that holistic piece of it, and the blue zones, maybe what we're really talking about with the four energies is your mental energy, your physical energy, your emotional energy, and then your spiritual energy. And emotional eating and binge eating will affect every single one of those four areas of your life on some level. The mental energy is your fire energy, so that's the thoughts, the monkey, the mind chatter, the hypervigilance, the safety behavior. So that's why we relate it to fire. The earth then, of course, is your physical energy, so that's about tapping back into your body clock, honoring your body, slowing down, having more balance in your life. And of course, the actual food that you're putting into your body. We always talk about choosing to nourish instead of punish yourself with food. So we don't talk about calories, we don't talk about weight, we don't do weight loss at all. That's not part of our program. Really, what we're looking for clients to do is to bring the relationship with food back to, is this going to nourish me or punish me? This decision that I'm going to make right now to either eat or not eat, is that a nourishing or punishing decision? And if you bring it right back down to that, it's a very powerful position to reset your relationship with food, but it takes time. With the emotional energy, then, of course, you're talking about people struggling with emotional regulation. And then, of course, if you are regularly binge eating, your body itself is under stress. So you're going to have high cortisol, which means you're going to have low serotonin, and that's going to impact your mood. It's going to cause anxiety. It's going to cause depression. It's going to cause poor sleep. So trying to bring all of that back into balance, and also helping people to get back in touch with their feelings. A lot of clients are very afraid of their feelings. And this is where the past comes into play, and maybe the trauma or the adverse experience that they've gone through, in their earlier life. If you had a dad or a mum who was very angry, for example, or who was an alcoholic and would become unpredictable or chaotic or even violent, when they were drinking, and that's just one very common, but one example of an experience that clients would have. You learn in that environment to put your own needs behind somebody else's. So somebody else is more important than everybody else in the house. So to keep mum or dad calm, to make sure they don't kick off, don't upset mum or dad, that kind of thing. So you learn to ignore your own emotions and your own feelings, and put somebody else's feelings ahead of your own. But that means that you're missing out on a very important part of your emotional development, which is actually emotional regulation. And of course, what the food is doing is helping you to numb out from the feelings, or discharge the feelings, or avoid the feelings. And when I say discharge the feelings, this is something we talk about quite a bit. I'm still talking about the emotional energy here. Anger is one of the strongest emotions that our clients struggle with, because maybe they weren't allowed to be angry in their family. Maybe only one person in the family got angry, or maybe the client decided, because of the anger that they experienced at the hands of a parent, that they were never going to get. I don't do conflict. I don't, I never get angry. To the extent that I had clients, and this is something that I noticed over the years, I'd have some clients who would really be able to speak to me about the most appalling situations, but they would just have this smile on their face the whole time, because they literally would not allow themselves to be anything other than putting forward this idea of like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. And of course, there's a whole host of stuff going on underneath that has never been touched, never been addressed. So sometimes clients will actually binge eat for the sole purpose of being able to get angry at themselves. Why did you do that? You're so weak, you've no willpower. But really what they're doing is they're discharging anger that may actually belong somewhere else, to a situation that happened with them in the day, or somebody else in their lives is very difficult to deal with. So the emotional energy can be very complex, and it can take quite a long time to work through all of that with clients. But it's a very important piece of the work, because when the client is able to recognize their own feelings, acknowledge and validate their own feelings, and deal with them, and ride them out, as we all should be able to do, normally, then that automatically reduces the triggers for emotion binge eating, in order to numb out from the feelings or discharge them in a way that the client feels is safe, i.e. towards themselves. And then finally we have the spiritual energy, and this is the piece of, when the client gets to this part of the work, this is the part that I love, because this is about us really reconnecting back in with who we are ourselves, our authentic selves, heart and soul, and giving ourselves permission to live an authentic life. Because so much of a client's life is a front, a facade, an act, or putting other people ahead of themselves. So they don't really give themselves the opportunity to be themselves, or to do what they love, or to honor their own needs. And so the spiritual energy is about, acknowledging your own creativity, or acknowledging your spirituality, or acknowledging, your talents and your values, and your all of that really important stuff that actually a lot of our clients, that part of their life can be quite underdeveloped as well. But we have to do the work in the right order. You can't start with, doing the creative work. You actually have to start right back at the very beginning with helping the client, first of all, feel more empowered around food, and be able to reduce those episodes of binge eating, and working on the mental energy. We literally have to calm the brain down, okay? Take the brain off the ledge, and bring about a little bit of calm, and an ability to be able to think and respond, as opposed to unthinkingly reacting, which is often coming from an unconscious place. So the program and the cards and everything we do, it's all designed to help clients separate their food from their feelings, but then also to separate their past from their present, because a lot of what's going on today did not start today or yesterday. It started way back in the past.
So would it be safe for someone listening to this podcast and say, I'm going to download Emma's book, I'm going to get the card deck and the workbook, and for them to work through that on their own, and then possibly to then reach out to your website, eatingfreely.com, and look for a practitioner that's skilled in what you're teaching to guide them further.
Absolutely, Brenda. So, the card deck it's not going to cure somebody from long-standing binge eating disorder, but it's certainly going to maybe help a client understand or a person understand what the work is that needs to be done. And it certainly has it certainly gives people a lot of light bulb moments, and it's a really nice resource to work with. But it would be very difficult to do that work completely on your own from scratch if you'd never had any help or support before. So yes, the whole idea of having something like a book and a card deck is not that this is your, the solution, but it's to give you that roadmap, and that understanding of maybe the work that needs to be done. And then if you are ready and you have the wherewithal, to be able to reach out to a practitioner and get some specialist support. And that's another thing that I will say as well. It is important to get specialist support. And I'm not just saying that because this is what we do. Um, a lot of practitioners will say that they can work with eating disorders, but if they haven't done the training, and actually if they don't have both the nutrition side as well as the psychological side, that can often be difficult for clients as well. And that's something that we combine in our program. Our program is built on 4 pillars of support. So you have your CBT, which is your that's going to help clients reduce their episodes of binge eating, really feel a little bit more empowered, break the autopilot, breaking those cycles of behavior that aren't helping. And clients again often think they have no willpower, but it's nothing to do with their willpower. It's actually to do with their brain and their unconscious processes. This became an unconscious response to stress a long time ago. So it's actually beyond your conscious control until you understand it and get to the bottom of that. So we have our CBT pillar, we have our nutritional rehabilitation pillar, because we have to get your gut working again. We have to get the hormones in balance. We've got to redevelop your hunger and fullness cues, which have often been completely overridden. And of course, reset that relationship with food and throw away all those old food rules and get people eating, a much better and more balanced way. The neuroscience then kind of ties back into the CBT. Again, that's understanding what's going on in the brain, the safety behavior, but we're also going to touch on the trauma then and kind of get into what happened in the past when we're doing the neuroscience piece. And then the 4th pillar we call mindfulness and self-compassion, but really that's a catch-all phrase for everything else, because in there it becomes quite individualized depending on the client's experience. We could be working on the past, we could be working on the family of origin, we could be working on the barriers to change or the payoffs for not changing. We could be working on inner child work. We could be doing body image work. We could be doing a lot of work. We do a lot of work on self-care actually for clients. And most clients also need help around boundaries. Because again, thinking about what I said earlier, if you were living in an environment where somebody else's needs were put ahead of your own, that's a situation where nobody really has good boundaries. And so we have to help clients learn how to put better boundaries in place. But the work has to be done in the right order. Um, and I see a lot of practitioners making mistakes around this, like trying to start bringing in intuitive eating, for example, for a binge eating disorder client. That won't work in the early stages because, of course, our clients' hunger and fullness cues, they're not there. They've been overridden years ago. So we have to do a little bit of work first before we can get. Of course, the gold standard is to be able to eat intuitively, but you're not going to be able to do that in the early days. So it is important to go to somebody who knows what they're doing, to make sure that they are going to work in the right order and, I suppose, keep the client in their comfort zone whilst at the same time kind of moving them out of their comfort zone, but at a pace that, is not going to overwhelm them. So that's really what we try to do with our program.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm so glad that I found you on LinkedIn because I was just immediately attracted to what you were doing, and I knew it needed to be the light needed to be shined on this more. Is there any phraseology tips that you can give us? Because I'm now more conscious of seeing friends and colleagues that I think are going through eating disorders, and I felt bad. I was in a situation, a group networking event, and I probably said the wrong thing. I said, "Oh my gosh, you look so thin. Are you okay?" And I wish I hadn't have said that. How can we approach and provide support to people that we think might be struggling with their eating?
Sure. Um, and it's really difficult not to refer to either the person's size or their actual food, the relationship with food. So you would see parents, of course, saying, Mary, you've got to eat. You must eat something. You're not getting away from the table until you finished your meal. That kind of thing. That's not helpful at all from parent. And I mean, that's so hard as a parent, to kind of watch your child not eat, or to know that your child is secretly eating a lot of sweets or chocolate up in the room. You're finding wrappers in the bin, and you're finding evidence that they're eating, junk food outside of the house. But again, making it about the food is really not helpful. Um, what's more important is to try and check in with the person. It seems to me like you're not that happy at the moment, or you seem to be quite stressed at the moment. Is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything going on for you? You have to remember that emotion eating, binge eating, and even, starving and restricting, it's all about control, and it's about emotional regulation. So bring it back to the emotions, bring it back to the how are you feeling, bring it back to the, you can speak to me, and everything you say to me will be in the strictest of confidence. I'm here for you. It's very difficult for people to speak out about this. It's very difficult for them to share. I have a slide in my I do a masterclass for professionals, kind of an introduction to what we do. And I have a picture of the famous actor, I can't think of his name, but it says, well, he's in a therapy office and he's saying, well, I'm often never honest with you. And the whole point of that is, even when a client comes in for help to a coach or a nutritionist or a therapist, if you don't ask specifically about the relationship with food, they may not tell you, because this has been a secret, and a shameful secret, for this client for so long. So to be able to just say to them, I'm here for you. We can go for a walk and have a chat, or let's, meet for coffee someday, and we can, just have a conversation. And I'm here for you, and I'm a safe space for you, is the message that you want to communicate. And your friend, colleague, or family member may not even take you up on that straight away, and you may have to repeat that message several times before they maybe trust you enough to open up to you. But I would always come at it from the perspective of, you don't seem to be that happy, or, I notice that you seem to be very tired lately. If somebody is not eating and they're quite thin, that's kind of where I'd, bring that one. I talk about the energy levels maybe, or even their concentration. I've noticed your memory hasn't been great lately, or I've just noticed that, a couple of things are, they've slipped recently, to make it more about, you want to point out to them maybe the consequences, or of what they're doing, as opposed to shining a light on what they're doing itself, because what they're doing itself is a symptom. It's not the actual problem.
That makes absolute sense. Your psychotherapy background started assisting people that were going through sexual assault. You dealt with that. You stepped up to that enormous role. Do you find that because someone has been through that horrid past, that it might segue into eating disorders or binge eating
So
as
it's
a
really
mechanism to?
interesting. It was actually, I was working in small business development, Brenda, and I was working with the Chambers of Commerce in Ireland up until my 30th birthday. Um, and I volunteered with the Rape Crisis Centre here in Ireland, and I was at the cold face, actually going up to the sexual assault treatment unit and meeting victims of rape and sexual assault when they were actually being brought in, literally within hours of an attack. Very, very traumatic for them, and very, very difficult situation. And the volunteers, like myself, we were there as an advocate for the person, and making sure that neither the doctors nor the police were overstepping any marks, or re-traumatizing the person. So that's what we were there to do. And it was out of that experience of working in that environment that made me walk down the road the day after my 30th birthday, and sign up for a full-time degree in psychology. After a year of being a volunteer, I decided that I wanted to work in the area of mental health, and just help people. Um, I never actually specialized in the area of sexual assault or trauma. Ultimately, I'd done my 2 years with the Rape Crisis Centre, and they don't really, once you do a 2-year cycle, you can sign up, or you can re-sign up or leave. And I decided to leave because I wanted to do other things. But as I then was working in my practice, yes, you would see quite a lot of disordered eating, and clients eventually maybe disclosing that there was sexual trauma or sexual assault. And of course, sexual abuse as a child would be a huge and very common trauma that clients would have gone through. So in the case of trauma, you'll see that manifest through disordered eating and other forms of, coping strategies, whether that's alcohol or drugs, um, in two ways. If a client is restricting, that's often that I don't want to appear like a woman. I don't want to be sexual, so I'm going to try and look as unsexual as possible and unflattering as possible, so I won't grow breasts, or my breasts will get really small, or, if I'm anorexic, that's not going to be a problem for me. And then on the other side, you have clients who are literally wearing their weight as a shield. So it's exactly the same thing. But it's just, again, I'm surrounded by this, extra weight that prevents people from seeing me as being sexual, and it prevents people from wanting to be with me in a sexual way, and I don't have to worry about any of that stuff ever again. So it would be very common that there would be, sexual assault, sexual trauma, and sexual abuse as a child are three, common underlying factors that are driving the disordered eating. And again, this is why I really hate the fact that eating disorders are called eating disorders, because they are nothing to do with food. They're actually nothing to do with food whatsoever. They're everything to do with safety and trauma and emotional regulation. And the sooner that we take the word eating out of the title and give them some other title, I mean, it should be, they definitely should come under the trauma umbrella far more than ever been called something to do with eating and food, because that's where the problem starts. People think it's about food, and it's nothing to do with food.
That makes sense. So, if a practitioner wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way if they wanted to start threading in eating freely into their practice and be more skilled in helping a patient? How would they reach out to you?
Well, our website, eatingfreely.com, our homepage, literally, you've got two buttons. You're either a practitioner looking for training or an adult looking for support. And again, we don't work with anyone under the age of 18.
Mhm.
But yes, we have a network of practitioners who work with people online and in person, depending on where you are. And if you are a practitioner, you can do anything from our introductory masterclass to just get a high level introduction and a couple of tools that you can bring into your practice. You can train with us and bring those skills into your practice so that you can competently work with emotional eating and binge eating disorder within your scope of practice, which is very important for practitioners. And we are, as you said, internationally approved as a continuing education provider, and it is considered to be an advanced training that does qualify you, kind of give you the skills that you need to be able to say you are an emotional eating specialist and can work with that issue. And then we also have the licensing option, which is a business opportunity for those practitioners who really want to make this their primary area of expertise and join us. And over a 2 year period, we really build you into that, deep specialist with a deeply specialist practice. And that's going to be the primary area that you're going to work with clients on. And we do find that a lot of practitioners who come to our training, as I said earlier, will have their own lived experience, and want to give back and want to make sure that other clients don't have to wait as long as they did or try and overcome it themselves, because it is very hard to find this specialist help out there. So a lot of our practitioners also have their own lived experience, which I think clients get a lot of comfort from, because, they know that that practitioner actually knows what they're going through. But we do know what people are going through, and we do understand it, and we do get it. And that's often the feedback that we get from clients, is that, I finally feel like I'm in the right place. And I found the help that I need after years of going to Weight Watchers and Slimming World and Jenny Craig and Brightline and Lighter Life, and trying the paleo and the keto and the intermittent fasting, and getting the gym membership and the personal trainer and the liposuction and the you name it. You name it. We've had women and men trapped for decades looking for help in the wrong place and not
Yeah,
been able to find the expert
it's such
support.
an industry to the weight loss industry just exacerbates this problem, I'm sure. So, if you don't mind holding up your card deck again for the four energies of emotional healing, if you're listening to this podcast or watching this on YouTube, I would highly recommend this as maybe a first step to opening up your spirit and soul for healing through something gentle that fully understands what you're going through as a person and the trauma that you've experienced in the past. And I just think Emma Murphy from Eating Freely so much for taking the light and shining the light on giving people help that are going through this sort of healing. It's just a wonderful thing. So, any last words that you want to share, Emma? I'll let you close this out with your wisdom.
I would just like to say to anybody who is struggling, and is listening to this, you know, and I know that you have been struggling with this for a very long time and probably have never told anybody about it, or very, very few people would know that this is a problem. I do just want you to know that there are people out here who do understand and who get it and can help you in, and there's absolutely no judgment, there's no weight stigma, there's no shaming. We absolutely fully understand the real roots of emotional eating and binge eating disorder, and we're here to help you unpack that slowly and at a pace that suits you. So please do not be afraid to just reach out, just send us an email on our website. We're happy to help. For any practitioners who are thinking, I'd love to work in this area, but I'm not qualified, or I'm only a nutritionist, or I'm only a health coach, please do reach out to us because, as I say, our continuing education training is internationally approved, including by the MBHWC in the US. And once you actually go through our training, you are able to help these clients. And if it's a calling that you have, please reach out and let us know because people out there need you. People out there need us.
Yes, absolutely. Don't hang up yet. Thank you so much, Emma Murphy, for sharing Eating Freely and all the resources that you have. And I hope to have you back on the show at another time.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I really appreciate it.